God, I just want a dad for Mommy. She's really tired." The whispered plea cut through the soft harmony of the choir and flickering candlelight, silencing the Christmas Eve service for one man. Owen Blake opened his eyes slowly in the back pew, searching for the voice. Near the front, a little girl knelt. She looked about 4, her tangled blonde hair catching the candlelight, her small hands tightly clasped. Her red dress was too big, its hem frayed, one boot looked older than the other. But her face was serious, her voice steady. "Please, God," she whispered again, "just a dad. Not for me, for Mommy. She cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Beside her sat a woman, head bowed, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Her long, honey-blonde hair was tied back hastily. She couldn't have been much older than 30, and her expression, though tired, was tender as she placed a gentle hand on the girl's back. Owen's chest tightened. He didn't know them, but something stirred in him, something long buried. He had come to this little church far from his Manhattan life, trying to find peace after losing his mother just 2 months earlier. It was her favorite service. She'd always said that Christmas miracles came quietly, not loudly announced, and now here he was, witnessing a child pray not for gifts, but for someone to take care of her mother. As the service ended, Owen watched the woman gather her coat and a worn handbag. The girl held a crumpled drawing and slipped her hand into her mother's. They left silently before the final hymn began. Without thinking, Owen stood. He stepped into the aisle and followed with his eyes as they walked out into the snowy night. Flakes swirled gently around them. The girl giggled, sticking out her tongue to catch one. Her mother smiled faintly, almost as if she had forgotten how. Hand in hand, they disappeared down the sidewalk. Owen didn't follow. He wasn't sure why he had stood at all, but her voice lingered, so small, so sincere. It echoed deeper than any sermon ever had. He remained inside until the last candle was snuffed out. The choir's notes faded, replaced by cheerful chatter as people filed out, arms full of gifts and cheeks pink from the cold. Owen stayed in the shadows. Eventually the pastor approached. "Are you all right, son?" Owen nodded. "Do you know the woman with the little girl?" The pastor thought for a moment. "She comes now and then, quiet, never asks for anything. I believe her name is Grace, the little one is Ellie." "Grace," Owen repeated. The name fit. "Lovely woman," the pastor added. "Life hasn't been kind, but she's doing her best." Owen gave a quiet thank you and stepped outside. The snow had thickened, blanketing the street in white. He stood beneath a street lamp, its glow casting a soft halo around him. Somewhere ahead, Grace and Ellie were gone. He didn't know them, but something about that moment, her voice, the weight of her words, clung to him. As snowflakes touched his face, Owen pulled his coat tighter and looked skyward. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, Owen could not shake the image of the little girl and her mother from his mind. He had returned to his luxury condo in Manhattan, but it felt colder than usual, emptier. The memory of that soft voice, "God, I just want a dad for Mommy," lingered like a melody he could not forget. By midday, he had a name, Grace Miller. The pastor had mentioned it, gently, almost protectively. Owen had discreetly reached out to someone he trusted, an old friend who now worked in local outreach programs. He did not ask for anything invasive, just enough to know if she was safe, if the child had food and shelter. What he learned both humbled and unsettled him. Grace lived in a rundown apartment complex in the old part of town. The building was decades past its prime, faded paint, broken mailboxes, rusted fire escapes. She was raising Ellie alone. Her husband had died 3 years ago in a car crash on his way home from a second job. Since then, she had been surviving, not living, not thriving, just surviving. She held down whatever work she could find. On some days, she scrubbed floors at a shopping center. On others, she washed dishes in a small diner or handed out flyers on street corners. Her income barely covered rent and groceries, and yet She never asked for help, not from the church, not from neighbors. She kept her head down, worked hard, and gave Ellie every ounce of love she had left. Owen stared out the window of his office, phone still in hand. He could not stop picturing her, the way she had gently rested her hand on Ellie's back in the church pew, the weariness in her eyes when she smiled. He made a call. That same afternoon, a contractor arrived at the apartment building under the pretense of inspecting roof damage. By nightfall, 2 broken shingles had been replaced and the worst leak sealed. A few days later, bags of groceries arrived at their door, anonymous deliveries. Fresh fruit, milk, bread, a warm woolen blanket. Owen never signed a card, but on the morning of New Year's Eve, he couldn't help himself. He rose early, drove through the freshly fallen snow, and parked on the quiet street in front of their building. The city had not yet woken up. He stepped out with a small bouquet of winter daisies, wrapped in brown paper, and a bottle of fresh milk. He placed them gently on the doormat of apartment 2B, then took out a small card he had written by hand. "Someone up there cares for you." That was all. He didn't knock. He didn't linger. But Ellie did. 10 minutes later, as Grace opened the door to retrieve the morning paper, she saw the items. She blinked, startled. Ellie came running. "Mommy, look! Flowers and milk!" Grace picked up the card and read it, her brow furrowed. Who would leave this? Ellie clapped her hands. "I told you, Mommy. I think God sent an angel. Maybe it's the one I prayed to at church." Grace smiled, but there was confusion in her eyes. She looked out into the hallway, empty and still, the morning light just beginning to peek through the dirty windows. She said nothing more, but that day, her steps felt lighter. She added the flowers to a chipped mug and placed it on the windowsill. Ellie insisted on drinking the milk slowly, like it was a special treat. Owen watched all this from across the street. Hidden behind tinted windows, he saw the way Ellie danced with joy, how Grace tilted her head while reading the note again and again, and something in him settled. He had spent years building things, properties, portfolios, public image, but this was different. This was something real, something good, something his mother would have smiled at. That night he returned to the same spot, the same doormat, with a small box of cookies and a note tucked inside, for the little one who believed. He never intended to be seen. But the next morning, as Grace held the box in her hands, Ellie said it again, eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, I think God really did send us an angel." And this time, Grace did not have an answer, but she held the cookies close and whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe he did." The wind was bitter that morning, as Owen stepped out of the cafe with his coffee. He had no reason to be on that side of town, yet he kept returning, pulled by a quiet curiosity, or something deeper he couldn't name. Near the corner of the market he saw her again. Grace, bundled in a worn coat, carried a small grocery bag when an elderly man slipped on the ice. She dropped her things and rushed to him. "Easy now," she said gently, helping him to a nearby bench. Moments later she returned with warm water and a packet of crackers. Owen watched from a distance, struck by the quiet grace of her actions. When the man tried to offer her a few crumpled bills, she smiled and shook her head. "Just stay warm." She gathered her groceries and disappeared down the street. Later, Owen saw her again, this time sitting on the stoop of her building, reading aloud to a little boy. His mother, still in an apron, rushed out minutes later. Grace handed the child back with a kind smile and returned upstairs, unnoticed by most. But not by Owen. He sat in his car for a long time afterward, his thoughts tangled. The world often overlooked women like Grace, quiet, worn, endlessly giving, but Owen saw her clearly. She reminded him of his mother, soft-spoken, strong, kind without fanfare. That night he pulled out old photos of his mother, her gentle hands in the garden, her calm smile. Grace didn't just resemble her in looks. She had the same spirit. And Owen realized then it wasn't just admiration. He was drawn to her. A few days later, he saw her at a gas station, dressed down in jeans and a jacket. Owen filled his tank. Grace pulled in beside him, her car coughing to a stop. She looked tired. "Cold morning, huh?" he said. She looked up, cautious. "Colder than I expected." "You live nearby?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not far." "I'm Owen," he said, offering his hand. "Grace," she replied, shaking it lightly. They shared a few light words. Grace even laughed once, when Owen joked about gas pumps freezing at the worst times. It was the first time he saw her smile fully, and it stunned him. Not long after, he ran into her again at the grocery store, this time with Ellie in tow. "You're the man from Christmas Eve!" Ellie exclaimed. "Mr. Christmas?" Owen chuckled. "That's me." Ellie took to him quickly, chatting away while Grace paid for their groceries. She spoke of her stuffed bear, her drawings, and how her mommy made the best pancakes when they had flour. Owen offered to carry their bags. Grace hesitated, then nodded. Days later, Grace collapsed at work. She had pushed herself too hard, 3 shifts in a row, barely eating. The clinic admitted her quickly, but her insurance was insufficient. The bill grew by the hour. When she woke, a nurse handed her a paper. "Your bill has been taken care of," the nurse said gently. "Anonymous donor. There's a note." With trembling fingers, Grace opened the envelope. "Paid in full. Merry Christmas." She stared at the words, heart pounding. Who would do this? And why? She held the note close, her voice barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The news came like a slap in the face. Grace was standing behind the counter of the small bookstore where she picked up weekend shifts, tidying the shelves during a quiet afternoon. Her coworker, a young woman with a nose for gossip, scrolled through her phone and gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning the screen toward Grace. "Isn't this the guy you were talking to the other day? At the gas station and again at the store?" Grace froze. On the screen was a glossy photo from a business article. Owen Blake, CEO of Blake Holdings, standing in front of a luxury high-rise with his signature half-smile and a sharp suit. Her heart sank. She took the phone and read the headline, "Reclusive real estate mogul returns to hometown for the holidays." She felt the color drain from her face. Everything clicked. The repairs, the groceries, the paid medical bill, the mysterious flowers, the note. It had been him. Grace left early that day. She barely remembered walking home, her thoughts a blur of disbelief and betrayal. By the time she reached her apartment, Ellie was drawing by the window, humming to herself. "Mommy," she beamed. "Mr. Christmas left a note in my book. He said he liked my drawing of Mr. Buttons." Grace knelt beside her, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's face. "Ellie, Mr. Christmas's real name is Owen. He's not just a nice man. He's very rich, very important, and he's been helping us." Ellie blinked. "He helped us because we needed help, right?" Grace hesitated. "Maybe, but I don't know if that's all." That evening she waited until Ellie was asleep. Then she walked down the snowy sidewalk to the cafe where she had seen him before, and he was there just like she knew he would be. Owen stood when he saw her. "Grace." She cut him off before he could speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" He exhaled. "Because I knew what you'd say." "You think I'm some charity case?" Her voice shook. "You watched me struggle, and instead of treating me like a person, you threw money at me like some rescue mission. That's not what this is." "Really?" she snapped. "Then what is it? You hide who you are, you act like some guy at a gas station, and all this time, you're Blake Holdings. You're the name on the bill, the food, the flowers. You lied to me." "I never lied," Owen said softly. "I just didn't lead with my net worth." "I don't need your pity," Grace said bitterly. "I don't need a rich man feeling sorry for the poor widow and her kid." "I'm not helping you because I feel sorry," he said, finally stepping closer. "I'm helping because you deserve better. You deserve peace. You deserve rest. You deserve joy. I've seen you, how you help people without expecting anything back, how you love your daughter with everything you have. That's not pity, Grace. That's respect." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "It's not your place to decide what I need." "No, it's not," he said gently. "But I care, and I want to be there if you'll let me." She turned to leave, but a small voice cut through the cold evening air. "Are you mad at Mommy?" They both turned. Ellie stood a few feet away, her jacket barely zipped, her teddy bear clutched in one hand. Owen crouched to her level, his throat tight. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at Mommy." "Because Mommy's scared," Ellie said softly. "When people help us, she gets scared they'll go away." Owen looked at Grace. She couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. He turned back to Ellie, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." Then he stood, met Grace's eyes, and said nothing more. Grace nodded slowly, wrapped her arms around Ellie, and walked away without another word. But she felt something shift, just a little. Not trust, not yet, but maybe something that could become it. The first snowfall of the new year blanketed the small town in quiet white. Owen stood at Grace's door with a carefully wrapped box in hand. Uncertain if she would open it, she did. Grace appeared in the doorway, cautious but no longer distant. "Hi." "Hi," Owen replied, holding out the box. "Just a small New Year's gift for Ellie." "She's coloring in the kitchen," Grace said, taking the package. "May I?" She nodded and stepped aside. "Of course." Ellie squealed the moment she saw him. "Mr. Christmas." "Still my name, huh?" Owen laughed. "It always will be," she said proudly. Grace sat nearby as Ellie unwrapped the gift, a soft lavender scarf with tiny silver stars. Her eyes lit up. "It's so pretty," she gasped. "Thank you, Daddy." The room fell silent. Owen froze. Grace stiffened. Ellie, unaware, twirled with the scarf. "Look, Mommy, he got it just right." Owen knelt beside her. "Do you like it?" "I love it," she said, grinning. He rose, meeting Grace's wide eyes. "I didn't tell her to call me that," he said softly. "I never suggested it." Grace nodded but said nothing. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," he added. "I just want to stay, if you'll let me. For her, for you." After Ellie went to her room, they sat at the kitchen table. Grace cradled her tea, eyes on the cup. "You caught me off guard," she said. "That word, it shook me." "Me too," Owen admitted. I've tried so hard to keep things steady. Ellie's only ever had me. Letting someone in felt like risking everything." He waited. "My husband, he was kind. Not perfect, but good. When he died, I lost more than love. I lost trust. I didn't think anyone else could care that much." "I understand," Owen said. "My mom passed not long ago. She was gentle, thoughtful. She believed kindness didn't need to be loud. That's what drew me to you. The way you helped that man, that child. You reminded me of her." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. She used to say, "Little miracles come from people who love without being asked." I didn't believe her until I saw you. Grace's tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. "I've been angry," she whispered. "At the world, at myself, for not being enough, for not giving Ellie more. You've given her everything that matters," Owen said. "Love, safety, joy. You're the strongest person I know." Grace looked at him. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to." Silence stretched, filled only by the soft hum of the heater and the muffled sound of Ellie humming in her room. "I don't know how to let someone in again," Grace admitted. "Then let's learn together," Owen replied. She let out a shaky breath. Something inside her eased. "I'm scared." "So am I," he said. "But maybe scared is the beginning of something good." Grace gave a slow nod. That night, as Owen stood to leave, Ellie ran to him. "Bye, Daddy," she said brightly, then paused. "Is it okay I call you that?" Owen knelt, hugged her close. "It's more than okay." Grace stood at the doorway, arms crossed lightly, caught between fear and hope. She did not stop Ellie. and she did not stop Owen when he turned to say, "I'll see you soon." This time she believed he would. Snow fell in thick flakes, coating the small town in a soft white hush. This time, the air wasn't heavy with silence, it was filled with laughter. Ellie ran ahead, her boots kicking up snow as she started shaping a snowman. "Hal needs a carrot nose," she called. Owen laughed, brushing snow from his coat. "What about arms?" "Sticks," she grinned. "Mommy can find some." Grace, wearing a scarf Owen had lent her, smiled. "On it, sweetheart." Together, they built a lopsided snowman with a twig smile and Ellie's mitten for a hat. Next, they headed to the ice rink. Ellen helped Ellie tie her skates and held her hands as she wobbled across the ice. Grace hesitated before joining them. "I haven't done this in years," she said. "Then we'll go slow," Owen replied, offering his hand. They skated, stumbled, and laughed until sunset painted the sky. By the time they got home, Ellie was half asleep in the back seat, her scarf slipping from her shoulder. That evening, Grace made chicken noodle soup. Ellie insisted on setting the table, and Owen helped with the dishes. After dinner, the three of them curled up on the couch under a blanket. Ellie lay between them, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons. Owen noticed the bear's frayed seams, the loose eye barely holding on, but Ellie held him close, like something precious. "Mr. Buttons is brave," she had once told him. "Mommy gave him to me when I was one. He keeps me safe." Later, when Grace carried Ellie to bed, Owen stayed behind. He picked up the bear, examined the worn fabric, the threads unraveling. He could have replaced it with a brand new toy, but he knew this bear wasn't just a toy. It was a memory. That night, Owen found a needle and thread. With patient hands, he restitched the neck, secured the eye, and reinforced the arms. He tied a tiny lavender ribbon around Mr. Button's neck, matching Ellie's favorite scarf. Then he placed the bear beside her pillow. The next morning, Ellie shrieked with joy. "Mr. Buttons is all better," she said, running into the kitchen. "Look, Mommy, he has a bow now." Grace looked at the bear, then at Owen, surprised. "He does." Owen stood by the window, coffee in hand. Maybe he just needed a little rest. Grace gave him a look, one filled with something warmer than before. But that night brought something else. Ellie went to bed after a long day. Grace and Owen sat quietly by the fire. Then Ellie cried out. Grace rushed to her side, Owen close behind. Ellie burned with fever, her cheeks flushed, her skin hot. "She's burning up," Owen said gently, checking her forehead. "We need to cool her down." They stayed by her side, trading shifts with cloths and whispered comfort. Around midnight, Ellie stirred and whimpered. "Daddy?" Owen leaned close, brushed her hair back. "I'm here," he said softly. "Daddy's here if you want me to be." She didn't speak again, but clutched Mr. Buttons tighter and drifted back to sleep. Grace stood in the doorway, hand to her chest. She had heard every word. Later, as Owen stepped out for more towels, she stopped him. "She called you Daddy," she said. He nodded. "I know. And you stayed." "I would stay every night, if you let me." Grace looked at him, her expression softer, more open than he'd ever seen. For the first time, she let herself really see him. He hadn't just come for Ellie. He had come for both of them. And finally, she was no longer afraid of what that meant. The church was quiet that morning, dressed in soft winter light. Snowflakes drifted past the stained glass windows, casting dancing colors across the wooden pews. It was nearly empty, just the way Owen had planned it. Grace stood at the entrance, holding Ellie's hand. "You said we were going to the park," she whispered to Owen, her eyes narrowing with suspicion but softened by a hint of a smile. "We'll go after," he replied, offering his hand. "Come inside." Ellie tugged at her mother's arm excitedly. "Come on, Mommy, it's a surprise!" Grace sighed, amused and curious, and stepped into the sanctuary with them. As they walked toward the front, she noticed something unusual. A single bouquet of white lilies resting on the pew, where she and Ellie had sat that Christmas Eve. Her breath caught. Then she turned and saw Owen standing beneath the soft glow of the altar candles. The church was empty except for them. The air felt sacred, not because of the building, but because of the moment. Owen took a step forward and reached for Ellie first. He knelt on one knee, looking up at her with warmth in his eyes. "Ellie," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion, "from the day I heard your prayer, something changed in me. You didn't ask for toys or magic or snow. You asked for someone to love your mommy, and I knew then that I wanted to be that person." Ellie blinked, lips parted in wonder. "May I be your dad?" he asked softly. "Not just for today, but for every day? For pancakes and snowmen and stories and all the hugs you'll ever need?" Ellie squealed, jumping into his arms. "Yes, yes, 1,000 yeses." Grace covered her mouth, tears already welling in her eyes. Owen turned toward her, still on one knee. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box, but he didn't open it right away. "Grace," he said gently, "that night I came to this church trying to remember what peace felt like. I had just lost my mother, and I thought maybe silence would help." He paused, swallowing hard. "Instead, I heard a little girl praying for someone to love you. And then I saw you, the way you held her hand, the way you carried so much and still found time to be kind to strangers. You reminded me of everything I loved about my mother. And then, something more, something I never expected." Grace's hand trembled as she lowered it from her lips. "I watched you love, quietly, fiercely, without asking for anything, and it undid me. You don't need saving, Grace, you never did. But if you'll let me, I want to stand beside you, not in front of you. I want to build a life with you, not because of what we've lost, but because of what we can become." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not large or showy, but elegant and warm, just like her. "Grace," he whispered, "may I be your home?" The church fell into silence, and then Ellie, unable to contain herself, burst out, "Please, Mommy, say yes!" Grace laughed through her tears, her body shaking from the swell of emotion she could no longer hold back. She knelt down beside them, cupped Owen's face in her hands, and nodded. "Yes," she said, "yes to all of it." Owen wrapped his arms around them both as the church bells rang out above them, echoing across the snow-covered streets. Outside, the town remained quiet, unaware of the miracle taking place inside. But for Grace, Ellie, and Owen, this was the answer to a prayer, the beginning of everything they never thought they'd find. The church looked exactly as it had that night, the same flickering candles, the same polished wooden pews, and the same hushed stillness that made every breath feel sacred. Snow drifted gently past the stained glass windows, casting soft colors onto the stone floor. Owen stood at the front of the sanctuary, adjusting his coat as he glanced toward the door. Grace stepped inside, holding Ellie's mittened hand. She looked around, confused. "Owen, what is this?" "You'll see," he said, offering a small smile. "Come closer." Ellie tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, it's a surprise, just like in the movies." Grace raised an eyebrow but let herself be led forward, the warmth of the sanctuary softening her guarded heart. Then she saw it, resting on the pew where she and Ellie had sat that unforgettable night, a single bouquet of white lilies. Her steps faltered, her breath caught. She turned back to Owen, her eyes wide, a question forming on her lips. Owen didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached for Ellie and gently took her hand. He knelt before her, smiling. "Ellie," he began softly, "do you remember the night you made a wish in this church?" She nodded eagerly. "I asked God for a dad for Mommy." Owen chuckled, voice trembling. "You did, and ever since that night you've changed my life." He looked into her wide, expectant eyes. "You've shown me what it means to love, to laugh, to be brave. You've given me something I didn't know I needed." Ellie leaned forward, whispering, "Are you gonna cry?" Owen laughed through his tears. "Maybe a little." Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Turning to her fully, he said, "Ellie, May I be your dad? Not just for today, but forever? For bedtime stories, snow days, and pancakes on Saturdays? She squealed, jumping up and down. Yes, yes, yes. Owen looked up, past her joyful face, past the golden glow of the candles, and found Grace standing there, frozen in place. He turned toward her, still on one knee. "Grace," he said, "I came to this church alone, broken and angry at the world. I had lost the woman who raised me, the only family I had left. I didn't come here looking for anything." He held her gaze, his voice full. "But I found you." Grace's hands covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "I watched you carry so much on your own," Owen continued. "I watched you love your daughter with more grace, more courage than I thought possible. I watched you give and never ask for anything in return." He opened the box. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a simple ring, elegant, timeless, as sincere as the man who held it. "Grace," he whispered, "may I be your home?" The room fell silent, heavy with emotion. Then Ellie shouted, "Please, Mommy, say yes." Grace let out a shaky laugh through her tears. She walked forward slowly, knelt beside them, and touched Owen's cheek with a trembling hand. "You already are," she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger. She pulled him into a hug, and Ellie joined in, wrapping her small arms around them both. The church bells began to ring, clear, strong, and joyful, echoing across the quiet, snow-covered town. Outside, no one knew what had just happened, but inside that little church, a family was born. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. A gentle fire crackled in the living room, and soft music played from the kitchen, where Grace stood frosting cupcakes, humming along with the melody. Owen was in the den, helping Ellie wrap presents with far too much tape and an endless supply of glitter. The snow outside lay thick and peaceful, just like it had a year ago. Everything had changed since then, and yet everything felt exactly as it should have always been. Owen and Grace had moved into a quiet home just a few blocks from the old church. It had a backyard for Ellie to run in, a cozy reading nook with pillows and books, and a front porch where they drank hot cocoa on chilly mornings. But more than anything, it had warmth, laughter, love. Ellie had blossomed into a bright, joyful little girl, always singing, always dancing, always talking about her family. She wore her lavender scarf everywhere and kept Mr. Buttons, now fully repaired, tucked beside her every night. And Owen, he had become more than Grace ever imagined. A partner, a father, a man who chose love, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Together, they had founded a charitable organization called Angel of Christmas, inspired by Ellie's whispered prayer that had changed everything. The nonprofit offered financial support, mentorship, and housing assistance to single mothers across the state. It became Owen's new legacy, one built not on skyscrapers, but on second chances. As the day wore on, Grace bundled Ellie into her coat and boots. "We have a quick stop to make," she said, smiling. "Where are we going?" Ellie asked, clutching a small wrapped gift. "You'll see." They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, the snow crunching beneath their boots, until the steeple of the old church came into view. The sanctuary was empty, except for a few lit candles flickering near the altar. Grace led Ellie to the front pew, the very same spot where she had once knelt, small and uncertain, praying for something she could not name. Ellie looked around, wide-eyed. "I remember this place," she whispered. "I thought you might," Grace said gently. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ellie leaned forward, folded her hands, and whispered toward the empty altar. "God, thank you," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I got my daddy for Christmas." Grace's eyes welled with tears. Owen stepped quietly into the sanctuary behind them. He said nothing, just placed his hand on Grace's shoulder and kissed the top of Ellie's head. Outside, the world was cold and quiet, But inside that little church, the warmth of a family born not of perfection, but of love, glowed brighter than any candle. And somewhere, deep in Grace's heart, she knew miracles were real, especially the kind whispered on a snowy Christmas night. Thank you for watching this heartwarming tale of love, healing, and unexpected miracles. Sometimes the quietest prayers are heard by the people who need them most, and sometimes family is not just found, but built, with grace, one act of kindness at a time. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where we bring you true-to-life stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all of the beauty in everyday moments. Until next time, stay kind and keep believing in small miracles.